The silver surface of Lake Michigan catches the late afternoon sun, sending diamonds of light dancing across my living room walls. From my window, I can see the gentle waves lapping against our private shoreline, the same shoreline where I once watched my children build sandcastles and where Richard proposed to me over 40 years ago. They say water holds memory. If that's true, then this lake remembers more of my family's truth than anyone else ever will. My name is Eleanor Wilson. Today is my 75th birthday, and I am completely alone. For decades, this Victorian estate on Lake Michigan's edge has been the cornerstone of our family. 3 stories of history, with wraparound porches and gardens I've tended with my own hands since Richard and I purchased it as a struggling young couple. Back then, it was just a dilapidated old house with good bones and a magnificent view. Now it's worth over $3 million. Not that my children seem to remember who made that happen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Lakeside, Michigan, I never imagined I'd own the grandest house in town. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress. I put myself through art school by waiting tables and teaching children's classes at the local community center. That's where I met Richard. He was taking night classes in business while working construction during the day. We were both dreamers, with empty pockets but full hearts. Richard had a vision. He could look at a decrepit building and see potential where others saw only ruin. I was the same with blank canvases. Where others saw emptiness, I saw possibility. Together, we restored this house room by room, while I built my art gallery downtown, and Richard started his real estate development company. Every nail we hammered, every wall we painted was an investment in our future, in our children's future. But as Richard's business grew, so did the distance between us. The charming, hardworking man I married became consumed by acquisition and appearance. Our home became less of a haven and more of a showpiece. Richard was the king of lakeside real estate, and I was reduced to the silent queen who arranged the flowers and selected the wine for dinner parties. I tried to fill the growing emptiness by pouring myself into our children. Olivia, our daughter, was so much like her father, ambitious, particular, with an eye always fixed on what came next, rather than what already was. Nathan, our son, more sensitive but eager to please, constantly seeking his father's elusive approval. I encouraged their dreams, celebrated their achievements, and held them when they failed. I was their constant, their touchstone, or so I thought. When Richard died 5 years ago, I expected grief. What I didn't expect was the revelation that came with it, the discovery of hidden debts, mortgages I'd never signed, tax problems I knew nothing about. Richard had built an empire on shifting sand, and now that he was gone, I was the one facing the collapse. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm afraid the situation is quite serious," explained Mr. Norris, our family attorney, his voice gentle, but his eyes unable to meet mine. Richard took out several large loans against the estate in the last few years. They're coming due. And with the current state of his business affairs, I sat there in our lakeside sunroom, surrounded by the antique furniture I'd so carefully collected, the original paintings from local artists I'd mentored, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. "But that's impossible. He would have told me." Mr. Norris's expression told me everything. No, Richard wouldn't have told me. I'd been kept in the dark for years, perhaps our entire marriage. "There are options," Mr. Norris continued. "You could sell some of the assets, perhaps downsize from the estate." The mere suggestion sent a jolt through me. This is my home. I restored it with my own hands. My children grew up here. Their children visit every summer. "I understand, Mrs. Wilson, but unless there's a significant influx of cash, I'm afraid the banks may not give you a choice." I didn't tell Olivia or Nathan the full extent of our financial troubles. I couldn't bear to tarnish their memory of their father, and frankly, I was embarrassed. I'd been so blind, so trusting. Instead, I quietly sold my art gallery to my former assistant for far less than it was worth, but enough to keep the creditors at bay for a while. I started teaching art classes again. I sold some of our more valuable pieces, artwork, jewelry, the boat Richard had barely used. Each sale was a small death, but I was determined to keep our family home. It wasn't just a house, it was our legacy. It was where Olivia had gotten ready for prom, where Nathan had learned to ride a bike on the long driveway, where my grandchildren now built fairy houses in the garden during their summer visits. At least, that's what I told myself as I struggled to maintain the aging Victorian. But as months stretched into years, I began to wonder if I was the only one who valued these memories. Olivia, now a successful marketing executive in Chicago, rarely visited except for major holidays. When she did, it was with her husband Thomas, and a seemingly endless list of complaints about the outdated state of the house. "Mom, you really need to update these bathrooms. Nobody uses clawfoot tubs anymore," she'd say, gesturing dismissively at the antique fixture I'd spent weeks restoring when we first bought the house. "I like my tub," I'd respond, trying to keep my voice light. "It has character." Olivia would roll her eyes the way she'd been doing since she was 13. "Character doesn't sell houses, Mom. You need to think about the future. Stainless steel, neutral colors, open concept living spaces. That's what buyers want." "I'm not selling, Olivia." "Not now, maybe. But eventually, you can't possibly maintain this place forever." Nathan was kinder, but no more present. Living. In Grand Rapids with his wife Rebecca and their 2 children, Sophie and Tyler, he was caught in the whirlwind of middle-class family life. Soccer practices, dentist appointments, school fundraisers. His calls became less frequent, his visits more rushed. "Sorry we couldn't stay longer, Mom," became his refrain, usually delivered while already loading suitcases into the car. "The kids have camp tomorrow," or "Rebecca has an early meeting," or any number of reasons that boiled down to the same truth. They had lives that didn't include me. I understood, of course. I reminded myself that I'd raised them to be independent, to build their own lives. But understanding didn't ease the loneliness that settled over the house like dust after they left. Still, I held on to my routines. My Tuesday and Thursday art classes at the community center, my daily walks along the lakeshore, my gardening, the roses that had won local awards, the vegetable patch that supplied most of my summer meals, the perennial beds I'd designed to bloom, from early spring through late fall, and I held on to the traditions that had defined our family, especially birthdays. In the Wilson family, birthdays had always been sacred. Richard had insisted on it. "Celebrating the day someone you love came into the world," he'd say, "is the most important holiday there is." Despite his many flaws, his absences, his secrets, Richard had never once forgotten my birthday. Every year, no matter where he was or what deals he was closing, there would be 75 roses on my birthday, my favorite raspberry lemon cake from Baxter's Bakery downtown, and a family dinner where everyone shared one thing they loved about the birthday person. After Richard died, I made sure we kept the tradition alive. I ordered my own cake, arranged my own flowers, and invited Olivia and Nathan for dinner. They came, reluctantly, some years, I could tell, but they came. Until this year. I'd been looking forward to my 75th birthday for weeks. It felt significant. 3/4 of a century. I'd ordered a new dress from the boutique in town, a soft blue that matched the lake on a clear day. I'd had my hair done at Marion's salon, splurging on a cut and color that took 10 years off my appearance, or so Marion claimed. I called Olivia first. "Sweetheart, I'm planning a little dinner for my birthday next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just family. I thought we could eat on the porch if the weather's nice." The pause that followed was telling. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Thomas and I are taking a long weekend in New York. We've had it planned for months. There's this exclusive restaurant opening, and his client got us reservations." "I see." I tried to keep the disappointment from my voice. "Well, these things happen. Perhaps when you get back?" "Of course. We'll definitely do something when we get back. I'll bring you something fabulous from New York to make up for it." I called Nathan next, clinging to the hope that at least he and his family would come. "Mom, I feel terrible," he said after I extended the invitation. "We're actually going to be at Becky's parents' lake house that weekend. It's their 50th anniversary, and they've rented boats for the grandkids." "That sounds lovely," I managed. "Family anniversaries are important." "We'll make it up to you, I promise. Maybe the following weekend, or I could come by myself during the week." "Don't worry about it," I said, forcing brightness into my tone. "We'll figure something out." I hung up and stared out at the lake, that constant companion that had witnessed every triumph and heartbreak of my adult life. For the first time, I wondered if I'd made a mistake fighting so hard to keep this house. What was I preserving it for? For children who couldn't be bothered? To drive a few hours for their mother's 75th birthday? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For grandchildren who preferred other lakes, other gardens, other homes, still, old habits die hard. On the morning of my birthday, I got up early and dressed carefully in my new blue dress. I arranged the flowers I'd ordered for myself. Not 75 roses, which seemed excessive for a party of one, but a lovely arrangement of lake-inspired blooms in blues and whites. I called Baxter's Bakery to confirm my cake order. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson," said Jenny Baxter, sounding genuinely distressed. "We don't have an order for you in our system." "Are you sure? I called last week. A raspberry lemon cake, just like always." "Let me double-check. No, I'm sorry. There's nothing here. We could make you something simple today, but our special cakes need at least 48 hours. "That's all right," I said, my voice hollow. "It doesn't matter." I spent the day in a fog, wandering through rooms filled with memories that suddenly felt more like ghosts. I considered calling Olivia or Nathan, but pride kept me from it. What would I say? "You forgot my birthday just like you've forgotten me?" No, I wouldn't guilt them. I wouldn't become that kind of mother. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good champagne Richard had been saving for a special occasion and took it out to the garden bench overlooking the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, heartbreakingly so. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, raising my glass to the empty air. That's when I saw the envelope, half hidden under the cushion of the bench. Curious, I pulled it out. It was addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a birthday card, handmade, with a watercolor painting of my garden on the front. "To our favorite teacher," it read inside. "Happy 75th birthday. Your art class couldn't let this special day pass without celebration. Join us tomorrow at the Lakeside Community Center at 2 p.m. for a surprise. With love and gratitude, your Tuesday Thursday artists." Tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness, this time, but of unexpected joy. My students, ranging from teenagers to fellow seniors, had remembered. They had cared enough to plan something, to create something, to celebrate me. In that moment, sitting in my garden with a homemade card, and the fading light on the lake, something crystallized within me. A realization that had been forming for years, but that I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Family isn't always who we're born to or who we give birth to. Sometimes family is who sees us, who values us, who makes space for us in their lives. I looked back at the house, my beautiful burden of a house, and made a decision. The next morning, I called Mr. Norris. "I'd like to discuss changing my will," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. and I'd like to explore options for selling the estate. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure, Mrs. Wilson? This is quite a change from our previous conversations. I'm sure, Mr. Norris. It's time for me to stop living in the past and start building a future. My future. May I ask what prompted this change of heart? I thought about the empty dining room table, set for one, about the calls that didn't come, about the handmade card tucked carefully into my purse. Let's just say I've realized who my real family is, I replied, and I'd like my estate to reflect that reality. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the air seemed lighter, clearer. I wasn't just Richard's widow or Olivia and Nathan's forgotten mother anymore. I was Eleanor Wilson, artist, teacher, friend, and at 75, I was finally ready to start living for myself. My meeting with Mr. Norris the following week was nothing short of liberating. For years, I had sat in his office with my shoulders hunched, listening to options that all felt like various forms of failure. This time, I walked in with my head high, my new blue dress buttoned to the collar, and a clarity I hadn't felt since Richard was alive, perhaps even before. Eleanor, Mr. Norris said, rising from behind his desk to greet me. His office hadn't changed in the 30 years I'd known him. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books, and a window overlooking Lakeside's modest main street. You're looking well. I feel well, Henry. Better than I have in years. I settled into the chair across from him, smoothing my skirt with steady hands. So, you're serious about selling the estate? He adjusted his glasses, concern evident behind them. It's been in your family for so long. Richard and I bought that house as a young couple with nothing but ambition, I corrected gently. It hasn't been in the family for generations. We created it, restored it, made it what it is, and now I'm choosing to let it go. His expression softened. Of course, I didn't mean to presume. No offense taken. I pulled a folder from my handbag. I'd spent the weekend organizing my thoughts. I've researched comparable properties in the area. Given the waterfront location, the historical significance, and the condition of the house, I believe we should list it for no less than $3.2 million. Mr. Norris blinked, clearly surprised by my preparedness. Yes, that seems reasonable. I can recommend several excellent real estate agents who specialize in luxury properties. I'd appreciate that. And now about my will. For the next hour, we discussed the details of my revised estate plan. The house and most of my assets had been split equally between Olivia and Nathan, with specific heirlooms designated for each of my grandchildren. Now I outlined a different vision. I'd like to establish a trust for the Lakeside Community Arts Center, I explained. They've provided me with purpose and community when I needed it most. Half of the proceeds from the house sale should go there, specifically for scholarships and programming for seniors and underprivileged youth. Mr. Norris took notes, his pen scratching against the yellow legal pad. And the other half? A quarter. Will be divided between Olivia and Nathan, I said firmly. The remaining quarter will be split among my grandchildren's education funds, with the stipulation that they can only access it for college or vocational training. That's quite a reduction from their previous inheritance, Mr. Norris said, carefully. Yes. I met his gaze steadily. My children have successful careers and comfortable lives. They don't need my money. They've made that clear by how little they value my time. And the personal items, the artwork, furniture, jewelry? I'd given this considerable thought. I'll be downsizing significantly. Some pieces I'll keep for my new home. For the rest, Olivia and Nathan can each select 5 items of sentimental value. Everything else will be appraised and sold, with proceeds going to the Arts Center. Mr. Norris set down his pen. Eleanor, I've known you and your family for decades. Are you certain this is what you want? Once we execute these changes... I've never been more certain of anything, I said. the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. With each word, I've spent my entire adult life putting my family first, their needs, their wants, their comfort. It's time I put myself first for whatever time I have left. He nodded slowly. I'll draft the new documents. We should be able to finalize everything within 2 weeks. As I left his office and stepped into the bright Michigan spring day, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. For so long, that house had been both my pride and my prison, a symbol of everything I'd built and everything I'd lost. Now, as I walked along Main Street, nodding to familiar faces, I found myself looking at the town with new eyes. The lakefront, condo development on Pine Avenue caught my attention. Modern, manageable spaces with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. No gardens to maintain, no ancient plumbing to repair, no empty rooms collecting dust and memories. I found myself stopping, studying the building with growing interest. "They're beautiful units," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Rachel Simmons, a woman from my Thursday art class. At 68, she was one of the youngsters in our group, a recent widow who'd moved to Lakeside after her husband's death. "I was just admiring the view," I said. Rachel smiled. "I live there. 4C. After Paul died, our house in Detroit felt like a mausoleum. Moving here was the best decision I ever made." She paused, studying my face. "Are you considering a change, Eleanor?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how right it felt to say it aloud. "Yes, I believe I am." "Well, there's an open house for Unit 5A this afternoon. Top floor, corner unit, the best view in the building. I'd be happy to show you around if you're interested." 3 hours later, I stood in what would become my new home, mesmerized by the panoramic view of Lake Michigan stretching endlessly before me. The space was half the size of my current kitchen and dining room combined, but it felt expansive, open, filled with light and possibility. "What do you think?" Rachel asked, watching me take it all in. "I think it's perfect," I whispered. The realtor beamed. "The building has excellent amenities, underground parking, 24-hour security, a common room for gatherings, and a small fitness center. Most of our residents are professionals or retirees looking to simplify without sacrificing quality." "How soon could I move in?" I asked. The realtor and Rachel exchanged surprised glances. "Well, with a pre-approval letter and a quick close, potentially within 30 days, the realtor offered. "Are you that certain?" I turned from the window, from the hypnotic blue of the lake that had been the backdrop of my life for so long. "Absolutely. Certain. I'll call my bank this afternoon." That night, I returned to the Victorian estate with new eyes. The creaking porch steps, the faded wallpaper in the hallway, the endless rooms filled with objects that had once seemed so important. They all felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I moved through the house with a camera, photographing each room methodically. These would be reference points for the real estate listing, but also my way of saying goodbye. In the master bedroom, I paused at the closet that still held Richard's suits, preserved like museum pieces. 5 years I'd kept them, unable to part with these tangible proofs that he had existed, that we had existed together. Now, I gently removed each one, laying them on the bed we'd shared for 40 years. "It's time," I told his memory. "Time for both of us to move on." The next morning, I called the local donation center. By afternoon, Richard's clothes were gone, along with several boxes of household items I no longer needed. Each departure felt like an exhalation, a release. I hadn't told Olivia or Nathan about my plans. Part of me wanted to wait until everything was finalized. The house listed, the condo purchased, the will revised. Another part, the part that had spent decades anticipating their needs and managing their emotions, was simply afraid of their reactions. But as the saying goes, news travels fast in small towns. I should have known better than to expect my secret to keep for long. The The call came 3 days after I'd signed the listing agreement. Olivia's name flashed on my phone screen, and I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom?" Her voice was sharp, demanding immediate attention. "What's going on?" "Thomas just got a call from his college roommate who lives in Lakeside. He said there's a for sale sign in front of the house." "That can't be right." I sat down at my kitchen table, steadying myself. "Hello, Olivia. Yes, I've decided to sell the house." The silence that followed was so profound, I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then came the explosion. "You... what?" "Without discussing it with us." "Mom, that's our family home. You can't just... What are you thinking? Is this because we missed your birthday? Because that's just childish." Her words hit like slaps, but I remained calm. "This isn't about my birthday, Olivia, though I won't pretend it didn't hurt to be forgotten. This is about me making decisions for my life, just as you make decisions for yours." "But the house, where will you go? What about all our things? What about holidays?" "Sophie and Tyler love coming to Grandma's house on the lake." I noted her priorities. The house first, my welfare a distant afterthought. "I'm buying a condo overlooking the lake. It's quite lovely. 1 floor, modern amenities, no maintenance worries. As for your things, anything you left here over the years has been boxed up. You're welcome to come collect it any time." "A condo?" Her voice dripped with disdain. "Mom, those places are for people who can't manage real homes. Is this about money? Because if it is, Thomas and I could help." "This isn't about money," I interrupted, though of course it partly was. "This is about me choosing a life that makes sense for me now. The house is too big, too full of the past. I'm ready for something new." "I can't believe this." Her voice broke slightly. "Does Nathan know?" "I was planning to call him today." "Well, don't bother, I'll tell him. We need to discuss this as a family. You can't make unilateral decisions about our inheritance." There it was, the word that revealed everything. Inheritance. Not concern for me, not understanding of my needs, but worry about what would no longer be passed to them. "Olivia," I said quietly, "you and Nathan inherited Richard's eyes, his determination, my creativity. You inherited opportunities and education and support that helped you build successful lives. The house is mine, and what happens to it is my decision." "We'll see about that," she snapped, and hung up. I sat there for a long time, watching shadows lengthen across my garden as the sun began its descent. I had expected anger, perhaps even this sense of entitlement. What surprised me was my own reaction, not guilt or second thoughts, but a reinforced certainty that I was doing exactly the right thing. Nathan called an hour later. His approach was different, less confrontational, more concerned, but with the same underlying message. "Mom, are you sure about this? The house means so much to all of us." "It means different things to each of us, Nathan," I replied gently. "To me, lately, it's been a burden I carry alone." "But we could help more. Rebecca and I could come up more weekends, help with maintenance. The kids could spend more time there in the summer." "That would have been nice," I acknowledged, "years ago when I first started struggling. But it's too late for that now. I've made my decision." He was quiet for a moment. "Liv said something about your birthday? Did we really forget it? I could have sworn it was next month." The fact that he didn't even know when his own mother's birthday fell said everything. "It was last Saturday, Nathan. The same day it's been for the previous 74 years. "Oh God, Mom. I'm so sorry." At least he sounded genuinely distressed. "With everything going on, Sophie's recital, Rebecca's promotion, I just lost track. That's terrible. We'll make it up to you, I promise." "There's no need," I assured him. "My art students threw me a lovely party. It was quite touching, actually." "Your art students?" He sounded confused, as if he'd forgotten this part of my life existed. "Yes. The people I teach twice a week at the community center. They remembered without reminders or calendar alerts. Nathan was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was subdued. "I guess we haven't been very good children lately, have we?" It would have been easy to reassure him, to fall back into my lifelong pattern of smoothing things over, making everyone feel better about themselves at my own expense. Instead, I told the truth. "No, you haven't. But that's not why I'm selling the house. I'm selling because at 75, I'm finally learning to prioritize my own happiness." Another pause. "I understand, or at least I'm trying to." There was a hesitancy in his voice. "Liv mentioned something else, about the will. She said Thomas's friend heard you've been meeting with Mr. Norris." News really did travel fast in Lakeside. "Yes, I'm updating my estate plan to reflect my current priorities." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I'm remembering people and institutions that have brought value to my life, especially in recent years." He absorbed this. Are you cutting us out?" "No, Nathan. But I am making changes that reflect the reality of our relationship, not the fantasy I've clung to for too long." The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken fears and resentments. Finally, he said, "Olivia wants us to come up this weekend. All of us. To talk about this face to face." I had expected this. "You're welcome anytime, but understand that my decisions are made. This isn't a negotiation." "Right," he said, his voice distant now. "Well, I guess we'll see you Saturday." After we hung up, I wandered through the house, touching familiar surfaces. The banister Richard had stripped, and refinished himself. The window seat where I'd read countless stories to Olivia and Nathan. The kitchen counter where we decorated birthday cakes and Christmas cookies. Each spot held memories, good and bad, joyful and painful. But as I moved from room to room, I realized something important. The memories wouldn't disappear when the house was sold. They lived in me, not in the wood and plaster and glass. I would carry them to my new home, keeping what nourished me, and finally, mercifully, letting go of what didn't. I spent the next few days preparing for the coming storm. I created an inventory of the house's contents, marking items I intended to keep for my condo, others that would be sold, and a short list of pieces that held genuine sentimental value: photo albums, children's artwork, family heirlooms that deserved to stay within the family regardless of recent hurts. I also met with my new friends from the art class, explaining the situation over coffee at the Lakeside Cafe. "They're coming to change your mind," said Doris, the eldest of our group at 82. Her artist's hands gnarled with arthritis, but still capable of producing exquisite watercolors. "Children always think they know what's best." "Let them try," I said with more confidence than I felt. "I've spent my whole life being sensible and accommodating. It's their turn now." "We'll be here if you need backup," offered Martin, a retired high school principal who had discovered a passion for sculpture in his 70s. "Just say the word." Their support warmed me more than they could know. For decades, my identity had been so wrapped up in being Richard's wife, Olivia, and Nathan's mother, the keeper of the grand house on the lake. Now, I was Eleanor the artist, Eleanor the teacher, Eleanor the friend. These roles felt more authentic, more truly mine than any I'd played before. Saturday arrived with ominous skies that matched my mood. A spring storm was rolling in from the lake, thunder growling in the distance as I prepared a simple lunch. I didn't go all out as I might have once. No homemade bread, no elaborate desserts. Sandwiches, soup, and store-bought cookies would suffice. This wasn't a celebration, it was a reckoning. Olivia arrived first, Thomas in tow, her face set in the determined expression that had always signaled trouble since she was a teenager. She embraced me stiffly, her perfume expensive and impersonal. "Mom," she said, examining me as if checking for signs of dementia. "You look different." New haircut, I replied, smoothing my silver bob. And perhaps a new perspective. Thomas kissed my cheek, his manner conciliatory. The house looks wonderful, Eleanor, as always. Thank you. Though not for much longer, I'm afraid. My realtor expects significant interest once the listing goes live next week. Olivia's expression tightened further, but she said nothing as she moved into the living room, her gaze sweeping critically over the furnishings as if mentally cataloging what she might claim. Nathan and Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later with Sophie and Tyler in tow. The children, 14 and 12 now, rushed to hug me with genuine enthusiasm that momentarily dissolved the tension. Grandma, did you really forget my birthday? Sophie demanded, her adolescent directness refreshing after her parents' careful evasions. No, sweetheart, I didn't forget. Tyler looked up at me with Richard's hazel eyes. Dad said we might not come to the lake house anymore. Is that true? Before I could answer, Nathan intervened. Let's not start with that, kids. Why don't you go down to the beach for a bit? The storm's still a ways off. They reluctantly obeyed, leaving the adults to the conflict that hung in the air like the approaching thunderheads over the lake. Should we sit? I suggested, gesturing to the dining room where lunch was laid out. We gathered around the table, the same table where we'd celebrated countless birthdays, holidays, achievements. No one touched the food. So, Olivia began without preamble, you've decided to sell our family home without consulting any of us. Yes, I said simply, and you're changing your will. This from Nathan, his tone more hurt than accusatory. Also yes. Because we missed your birthday, Olivia pressed. I shook my head. No, because my birthday was merely the final confirmation of what I've known for some time, that the role I've played in this family is no longer needed or valued. That's not fair, Nathan protested. We've been busy, yes, but we love you, Mom. I believe you do, in your way, I acknowledged. But love isn't just a feeling, Nathan. It's actions. It's presence. It's remembering what matters to someone. So this is punishment, Olivia concluded, her voice hard. No, I said firmly. This is me finally prioritizing my own needs after a lifetime of putting everyone else first. The house is too big, too expensive, and too full of the past. The condo I'm buying is perfect for me now, manageable, modern, and still overlooking the lake I love. But what about us? Olivia demanded. What about our memories, our inheritance, our children's connection to their grandparents? Thunder rumbled closer as I measured my words carefully. Your memories will remain yours, regardless of who owns this house. Your inheritance was never guaranteed. It was always a gift, not an entitlement. And as for your children, my grandchildren, their connection to me has nothing to do with this property and everything to do with the time and attention we share. Rebecca, who had been quiet until now, gently intervened. What exactly are you planning, Eleanor? For the will, I mean. I appreciated her directness. I'm establishing a trust for the Lakeside Community Arts Center, where I've found purpose and community these past few years. Half the proceeds from the house sale will go there. A quarter will be divided between Olivia and Nathan. The remaining quarter will be held in trust for the grandchildren's education. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the increasing tempo of rain now pattering against the windows. Olivia's face had drained of color, while Nathan looked as though I'd slapped him. You're giving away our inheritance to some local art club? Olivia finally managed, her voice strangled. I'm supporting an organization that has supported me, I corrected. And you're still receiving significant funds, just not the windfall you apparently expected. This is insane, Olivia pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. You've always been emotional, Mom, but this is beyond reasonable. That money should stay in the family. The money is mine, I reminded her quietly. Earned through decades of work with your father, preserved through careful management after his death, and mine to distribute as I see fit." "We could contest it," Thomas said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to him. "If we could demonstrate diminished capacity or undue influence—" "Stop it," Nathan cut in, surprising everyone. "Just stop. You're talking about our mother, for God's sake." Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "I'm just saying there are legal options." "There are no legal options," I interrupted firmly. "I've had a full cognitive assessment as part of updating my estate plan. I am entirely competent, completely sound of mind, and making decisions based on careful consideration, not emotional reaction." Olivia sank back into her chair, her anger deflating into something that looked almost like fear. "I don't understand. We've always talked about keeping the house in the family. Dad always said—" "Your father said many things," I said gently. "Some he meant, some he didn't. But he's been gone for 5 years and I'm still here, trying to build a life that makes sense for me now." Thunder crashed directly overhead, making everyone jump. Outside, the storm had arrived in full force, sheets of rain obscuring the view of the lake. "I think," I said into the charged silence, "that it's time we all acknowledge some difficult truths." The storm outside mirrored the tempest within the dining room. Lightning flashed, illuminating the shocked faces of my children, while thunder punctuated the heavy silence between us. I had spent decades avoiding confrontation, smoothing over conflicts, making peace at my own expense. But now, with my future literally on the line, I found courage I hadn't known I possessed. "What truths?" Nathan finally asked, his voice subdued. I took a deep breath. "The truth that this family has been running on appearances rather than genuine connection for a very long time. The truth that after Richard died, I struggled financially, emotionally, and practically, and neither of you noticed, much less offered substantial help." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "That's not fair. We both offered to help with money." "Once," I interjected. "You each offered once, in the weeks after the funeral. I declined because I was still in shock, still trying to understand the situation myself. After that, you both assumed everything was fine because that's what I've always done. Made everything appear fine regardless of what was happening beneath the surface." "You should have told us if things were bad," Nathan said, a defensive edge to his voice. "Perhaps. But you also could have asked. You could have paid attention. You could have visited more than twice a year. You could have called without me initiating contact. You could have remembered my birthday." The last part slipped out despite my intention to keep this discussion above petty grievances. But the hurt of that forgotten birthday still stung, a paper cut among greater wounds, but painful nonetheless. Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. Of all of them, she seemed to be truly listening. "You're right, Eleanor. We've taken you for granted. That's on us." "Speak for yourself," Olivia muttered. I turned to my daughter, studying her beautiful, closed face. She looked so much like Richard in moments of conflict. The same set jaw, the same refusal to yield, even an inch of ground. "Olivia, when was the last time you asked me about my life? Not my health, not whether I needed anything, but about what brings me joy. About what I do with my days. About who I am now that I'm not primarily defined as someone's wife or mother." She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly searching her memory for an example she couldn't find. "That's what I thought," I said gently. "I've become invisible to you, to both of you. I'm a background character in your lives, notable only when I can be useful or when I disrupt your expectations, as I'm doing now." "That's not true," Nathan protested, but weakly. "We care about you. We love you." "I believe you think you do," I acknowledged. "But love requires attention, and the kind of attention you've given me these past years has been minimal and obligatory. Meanwhile, my art students, people who have known me for a fraction of the time you have, throw me birthday parties, They call to check on me. They invite me to dinners and gallery openings and community events. They see me as a whole person, not just a mother, not just a widow, not just the keeper of this house. The rain drummed harder against the windows, water streaming down the glass in rivulets that distorted the view of the churning lake beyond. None of us had touched the food I'd prepared. "So you're replacing us," Olivia said flatly. "Trading your family for a bunch of senior citizens who paint watercolors." I shook my head, refusing to rise to her bait. "I'm not replacing anyone. I'm expanding my life to include people who value my presence. The question isn't why I'm doing that, but why you find it so threatening." That struck home. Olivia flushed while Nathan studied his hands intently. Thomas cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Eleanor, this seems like an extreme reaction. Selling the house, changing your will. Couldn't we find some compromise?" I regarded my son-in-law thoughtfully. Thomas had always been diplomatic, the corporate lawyer skilled at negotiation. "What compromise would you suggest, Thomas? That I keep a house that's become a financial and emotional burden? That I continue to prioritize the expectations of children who barely make time for me? Or perhaps that I split my estate differently? More for family, less for the community that actually supports me?" He shifted uncomfortably. "When you put it that way, I'm not being vindictive," I clarified. "I'm being honest about where I find value in my life now and where I want my resources to go when I'm gone. Olivia, Nathan, you've both built successful lives. You have careers, homes, families of your own. You don't need this house or the money it represents. What you've needed from me is love and support, which I've given unstintingly for decades. But now I need to direct some of that care toward myself." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I think I understand. This isn't about punishment. It's about appropriate boundaries." Olivia shot her sister-in-law an irritated glance. "Don't psychoanalyze my mother, please. This is a family matter." "Rebecca is family," I pointed out. "And she's the only one at this table who seems willing to hear what I'm actually saying." Nathan, who had been unusually quiet, finally looked up. There was something in his expression, not anger or denial, but a dawning comprehension that gave me hope. "You're really serious about this, aren't you, Mom? This isn't a negotiation or a cry for attention. You've made up your mind." "Yes," I confirmed. "I have." He nodded slowly. "And the changes to the will, they're about more than money, aren't they? They're about recognizing who's actually been there for you." "Exactly." Olivia stood again, this time more deliberately. "Well, I can see this discussion is pointless. You've clearly made your decisions without any regard for what Dad would have wanted or what's best for the family legacy." The mention of Richard's wishes sparked something in me, a flash of indignation I'd suppressed for too long. "Olivia, sit down. We're not finished." Perhaps it was the unexpected steel in my voice, but she obeyed, her eyes wide with surprise. "Let me tell you something about your father and his wishes," I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Richard built a life on appearances. He created a successful business, a beautiful home, a picture-perfect family, and he leveraged all of it to borrow more than we could ever repay. When he died, I discovered we were nearly bankrupt. The business was failing. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. There were tax liens I knew nothing about." Shock registered on their faces. Even Thomas, who prided himself on financial acumen, seemed stunned. "That's impossible," Olivia whispered. "Dad was brilliant with money. Everyone said so." "Everyone believed what he wanted them to believe," I corrected, "including me, until the truth became unavoidable. The last 5 years haven't just been about grief, Olivia. They've been about survival. I sold my gallery, I sold my jewelry, I sold artwork and furniture and anything else I could bear to part with. I took teaching jobs I was overqualified for because they paid quickly and reliably, all to keep this house, to maintain the illusion that everything was fine, to protect your father's reputation and your memories of him. Nathan looked stricken. Why didn't you tell us? Pride at first, I admitted. Then the habit of protection. And finally, the realization that neither of you was truly interested in the unvarnished truth about your parents' lives. That's not fair, Olivia protested, but there was a new hesitancy in her voice. Isn't it? Olivia, you've spent your entire adult life trying to recreate what you thought we had. The perfect marriage, the perfect home, the perfect social standing. Nathan, you've measured yourself against your father's perceived success and found yourself wanting. Neither of you has ever wanted to see Richard clearly, to acknowledge his flaws along with his strengths, and by extension, neither of you has ever truly seen me. Not as I actually am, but as the mother you needed me to be. The room fell silent except for the storm outside, which seemed to be lessening, the thunder more distant now, the rain softening to a gentle patter. The worst had passed, outside and perhaps in here as well. Mom, Nathan said quietly. I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were so difficult. That's partly my fault, I acknowledged. I've spent a lifetime making things look easier than they were. But it's also the result of a distance that's grown between us. A distance I tried to bridge until I finally accepted that perhaps it was meant to be there. Olivia was staring at the table, her expression unreadable. So all those years, all those perfect Christmases, the vacations, the dinners, it was all fake? Just some show Dad was putting on? I considered this. No, not fake. Your father loved you both very much. He loved me too, in his way. But he was a complicated man who valued appearance over substance, and that approach eventually caught up with him, or rather, with me, after he was gone. And now you're done pretending, Nathan observed. Yes, I said simply. I'm done pretending. Done pretending this house isn't killing me financially. Done pretending I don't notice when my birthday passes without acknowledgement. Done pretending that occasional visits and perfunctory phone calls constitute a meaningful relationship. I want whatever time I have left to be authentic, even if that authenticity is uncomfortable. Rebecca squeezed my hand again. I think that's incredibly brave, Eleanor. Thomas looked less convinced but had the wisdom to remain silent. Olivia was still processing, her expression cycling through disbelief, hurt, and something that might have been dawning recognition. The doorbell rang, startling all of us. Are you expecting someone? Nathan asked. No, I replied, rising from my chair. Excuse me. I made my way to the front door, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the intensity of our conversation. When I opened it, I found Martin and Doris from my art class standing on the porch, raincoats dripping. Sorry to intrude, Martin said with his characteristic directness. The storm knocked out power at the community center, and we were setting up for tomorrow's exhibition. We thought perhaps we could store some of the more delicate pieces here overnight. We remembered you have that sunroom with all the natural light. Of course, I said, touched by their consideration in asking rather than simply rescheduling. Bring them in. They retrieved several portfolios and wrapped canvases from Martin's SUV, and I led them toward the sunroom at the back of the house. As we passed the dining room, all conversation had ceased as my family stared at the newcomers. Oh, Doris said, noticing them. We're interrupting something. We can come back. Nonsense, I assured her. This is my daughter Olivia and her husband Thomas, my son Nathan and his wife Rebecca. And these are my friends and fellow artists, Martin Chen and Doris Abernathy. Awkward nods were exchanged. Martin, perceptive as always, immediately understood the tension. We teach with Eleanor at the community center, he explained, his dignified presence commanding attention. She's transformed our program over the past few years, doubled enrollment, secured grant funding, established our first juried exhibition. The Lakeside Vision show opening tomorrow is largely her creation. I felt myself blushing. Martin exaggerates. It's been a group effort. She's being modest, Doris added, her bird-like frame vibrating with enthusiasm. Eleanor's work with senior artists has given many of us a purpose we'd lost. Some of our members were isolated, depressed after losing spouses or retiring. Her classes have become a lifeline. My children were staring at me as if seeing a stranger. In a way, they were. The woman these artists were describing, a community leader, a grant writer, an exhibition organizer, was someone Olivia and Nathan had never bothered to know. "We'll just get these pieces into the sunroom," I said, breaking the awkward silence. "I'll be right back." As I guided Martin and Doris to the sunroom, I could feel the weight of my family's gaze following us out of the dining room. Once we were alone with the artwork, Martin raised an eyebrow. "Family meeting not going well?" I sighed, helping him arrange the portfolios carefully on the wicker furniture. "About as well as expected. They're having trouble accepting that I'm making decisions without their approval." Doris snorted. Children always think they own their parents' lives. My son tried to talk me out of selling my house in Chicago after Harold died. Said I was being impulsive. I'd been thinking about it for 2 years. "We did interrupt," Martin observed. "Should we take these somewhere else?" "Absolutely not," I assured them. "Actually, your timing is perfect." They needed to see that I have a life beyond being their mother. People who value my contributions. Work that matters. Doris squeezed my arm. "Well, if you need reinforcements, just holler. I can be very intimidating for someone who barely clears 5 feet." I laughed, grateful for their presence. "I'll keep that in mind." When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. My children were talking in low voices, which ceased abruptly when I entered. "Your friends seem passionate about art," Olivia offered, attempting civility. "They are," I agreed, resuming my seat. "They're also passionate about community, about creating meaningful connections in the second half of life. We all are." Nathan was studying me with new eyes. "Mom, I had no idea you were so involved with the community center. You never talk about it when we call." "You never ask," I said simply. "Our conversations tend to revolve around your lives, your jobs, your children, your concerns, which is natural to an extent. But it's become so one-sided that you know almost nothing." "About who I am now?" "Apparently," Olivia murmured, her tone inscrutable. Outside, the storm had passed. Watery sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds, casting dappled patterns on the dining room wall. It felt symbolic somehow, clarity emerging after turbulence. "I'd like to see it," Rebecca said suddenly. "See what?" Nathan asked. "No," I replied, rising from my chair. "Excuse me." I made my way to the front door, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the intensity of our conversation. When I opened it, I found Martin and Doris from my art class standing on the porch, raincoats dripping. "Sorry to intrude," Martin said with his characteristic directness. The storm knocked out power at the community center, and we were setting up for tomorrow's exhibition. We thought perhaps we could store some of the more delicate pieces here overnight. We remembered you have that sunroom with all the natural light. "Of course," I said, touched by their consideration in asking rather than simply rescheduling. "Bring them in." They retrieved several portfolios and wrapped canvases from Martin's SUV, and I led them toward the sunroom at the back of the house. As we passed the dining room, all conversation had ceased as my family stared at the newcomers. "Oh," Doris said, noticing them. "We're interrupting something. We can come back." "Nonsense," I assured her. "This is my daughter Olivia and her husband Thomas, my son Nathan and his wife Rebecca. And these are my friends and fellow artists, Martin Chen and Doris Abernathy." Awkward nods were exchanged. Martin, perceptive as always, immediately understood the tension. "We teach with Eleanor at the community center," he explained, his dignified presence commanding attention. "She's transformed our program over the past few years, doubled enrollment, secured grant funding, established our first juried exhibition. The Lakeside Vision show opening tomorrow is largely her creation." I felt myself blushing. Martin exaggerates. It's been a group effort. "She's being modest," Doris added, her bird-like frame vibrating with enthusiasm. "Eleanor's work with senior artists has given many of us a purpose we'd lost. Some of our members were isolated, depressed after losing spouses or retiring. Her classes have become a lifeline." My children were staring at me as if seeing a stranger. In a way, they were. The woman these artists were describing, a community leader, a grant writer, an exhibition organizer, was someone Olivia and Nathan had never bothered to know. "We'll just get these pieces into the sunroom," I said, breaking the awkward silence. "I'll be right back." As I guided Martin and Doris to the sunroom, I could feel the weight of my family's gaze following us out of the dining room. Once we were alone with the artwork, Martin raised an eyebrow. "Family meeting not going well?" I sighed, helping him arrange the portfolios carefully on the wicker furniture. "About as well as expected. They're having trouble accepting that I'm making decisions without their approval." Doris snorted. "Children always think they own their parents' lives. My son tried to talk me out of selling my house in Chicago after Harold died. Said I was being impulsive. I'd been thinking about it for 2 years." "We did interrupt," Martin observed. "Should we take these somewhere else?" "Absolutely not," I assured them. "Actually, your timing is perfect." They needed to see that I have a life beyond being their mother. People who value my contributions, work that matters. Doris squeezed my arm. "Well, if you need reinforcements, just holler. I can be very intimidating for someone who barely." "Clears 5 feet." I laughed, grateful for their presence. "I'll keep that in mind." When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. My children were talking in low voices, which ceased abruptly when I entered. "Your friends seem passionate about art," Olivia offered, attempting civility. "They are," I agreed, resuming my seat. "They're also passionate about community, about creating meaningful connections in the second half of life. We all are." Nathan was studying me with new eyes. "Mom, I had no idea you were so involved with the community center. You never talk about it when we call." "You never ask," I said simply. "Our conversations tend to revolve around your lives, your jobs, your children, your concerns, which is natural to an extent. But it's become so one-sided that you know almost nothing about who I am now." "Apparently," Olivia murmured, her tone inscrutable. Outside, the storm had passed. Watery sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds, casting dappled patterns on the dining room wall. It felt symbolic somehow, clarity emerging after turbulence. "I'd like to see it," Rebecca said suddenly. "See what?" Nathan asked. "The exhibition Martin mentioned, the one your mother helped organize. I'd like to go tomorrow." I felt a surge of appreciation for my daughter-in-law. "It opens at noon. Nothing fancy, but we're featuring work from over 30 local artists, most over 65. The theme is renewal, interpretations of rebirth and reinvention in later life." Rebecca smiled warmly. "It sounds wonderful. We'll be there." Nathan nodded, though less enthusiastically. "Sure, we can go before heading back to Grand Rapids." I turned to Olivia. "You and Thomas are welcome to join, of course." My daughter hesitated, her internal struggle visible. Pride warred with curiosity on her face. "We'll see. We were planning to head back to Chicago early." "As you wish," I said neutrally, refusing to plead or persuade. Those days were behind me. Thomas cleared his throat. Coming back to the matter at hand, The house and the will. Is there any room for discussion, Eleanor? Any possibility of a different arrangement that might better honor Richard's intentions for the property? It was a lawyer's question, precise and calculated. I appreciated his directness, if not his persistence. Richard's intentions died with him, I said firmly, as did any obligation I had to maintain appearances on his behalf. What remains is my life. Hopefully many more years of it, and I intend to live it authentically. The house is being sold. The proceeds will be distributed as I outlined. My art and personal effects will go where I decide they'll be most valued. And there's nothing we can say to change your mind? Olivia pressed. I considered this. You could try to understand why I'm making these choices. You could acknowledge the patterns that brought us to this point. You could commit to building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. None of that would change my decisions about the house or my estate, but it might change the nature of our relationship moving forward. Olivia looked away, unwilling or unable to offer such concessions. Nathan, however, seemed to be processing everything with growing awareness. I think I'm starting to understand, he said slowly. This isn't about punishing us. It's about you finally taking care of yourself after a lifetime of taking care of everyone else. Yes, I said, relieved that at least one of my children was grasping the essential truth. Exactly that. And we've made it easy for you to make these decisions, he continued, by being so absent, so wrapped up in our own lives that we didn't notice yours changing. Rebecca squeezed his hand supportively. I could see she'd been trying to tell him similar truths for some time. It's not entirely your fault, I offered. I've enabled this dynamic by never demanding more, by always being the one to reach out, to remember, to accommodate. But yes, your inattention made it clear where your priorities lie, and helped me clarify my own. Olivia pushed her chair back abruptly. I need some air, she announced, and walked out onto the porch without waiting for a response. Thomas hesitated, then followed her. She's taking this personally, Nathan observed unnecessarily. Of course she is, I replied. Olivia has built her entire identity around being Richard's daughter, around the version of this family that exists in her mind, learning that it was all more complicated, that her father left financial chaos, that her mother has a life beyond the maternal role, that the house she idealized might belong to strangers. It challenges everything she thinks she knows. And me? Nathan asked quietly. What have I built my identity around? The question surprised me with its self-awareness. Accommodation, I said after a moment's thought. Following the path of least resistance, first with your father, then with Olivia, even sometimes with Rebecca and the children. You've spent your life trying not to disappoint anyone, and in the process, you've occasionally disappeared altogether. He winced. That's uncomfortably accurate. Rebecca nodded. I've been saying something similar for years. You're too concerned with making everyone else happy. Like mother, like son, I observed with a sad smile. The difference is that I've finally learned the cost of that approach. I'm hoping you figure it out sooner than I did. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken truths finally acknowledged between us. Then the back door slammed, and Sophie and Tyler burst in, damp from playing near the lake despite the passing storm. Mom, Sophie exclaimed. The fish are jumping like crazy after the rain. You should come see. Rebecca smiled at her daughter. In a minute, sweetheart. We're still talking with Grandma. Tyler approached me, his expression serious. Grandma, is it true you're selling the house? Dad said we might not come here anymore. I patted the chair beside me, and my grandson sat down, gangly limbs and earnest eyes. Yes, Tyler, I am selling the house, but that doesn't mean we won't see each other. I'll still be in Lakeside, just in a different home, one that's easier for me to take care of by myself. But what about our summer visits? Sophie asked, her 14-year-old face pinched with concern. "Where will we stay?" "There are wonderful hotels right on the lake," I assured her. "Or you could even stay with me sometimes. My new place isn't as big, but I'll make sure there's room for my grandchildren." Tyler considered this. "Will you still have your art studio? I liked watching you paint last summer." My heart warmed at the reminder that my grandchildren, at least, had shown interest in my creative life. "Yes, I'll have a smaller studio, but I'll still be painting and teaching. In fact, I'm part of an art exhibition opening tomorrow. Would you like to come see it?" Both children nodded enthusiastically. "Can we, Dad?" Tyler asked Nathan. "Of course," Nathan replied. "We're all ready, planning to go before we drive home." "Cool," Sophie said. "Can I invite Amber? She's at the lake house next door this weekend. She likes art too." "The more the merrier," I told her. "Now, why don't you both grab some lunch? I made turkey sandwiches." As the children helped themselves to food, Nathan leaned closer to me. "Mom, I want you to know I am sorry. About the birthday, about not being around more, about taking you for granted. I can't speak for Olivia, but I'm going to do better. I promise." I studied his face, searching for the authenticity behind the words. What I saw reassured me. "I believe you, Nathan, and I appreciate it. But understand, my decisions about the house and my estate aren't conditional on your behavior. They're made based on what I believe is right for me at this point in my life." "I understand," he nodded, "and I respect that. I just want you to know that regardless of the house or the money, I want to be a better son. I want my kids to know their grandmother, the real you, not just the role you've played." Rebecca smiled. "Maybe we could come up one weekend a month? Make it a regular thing?" "I'd like that very much," I said, feeling a cautious optimism unfurling within me. The front door opened, and Olivia and Thomas returned. My daughter's eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was composed. She sat down across from me, folding her hands deliberately on the table. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady, "about what you said regarding Dad and the financial situation." She paused, seeming to struggle with her next words. "Is it possible? Was Dad not the financial genius everyone thought he was?" It was a significant concession from Olivia, who had spent her life idolizing Richard. "Your father was brilliant in many ways," I said carefully. "He had vision and charisma and drive. But yes, his financial decisions, especially toward the end, were deeply flawed. He took risks that didn't pay off, borrowed against assets that couldn't sustain the debt, and kept all of it hidden from me until it was too late." She absorbed this, pain flickering across her face. "That must have been terrible for you, discovering all that after he was gone." "It was," I acknowledged. "But in a strange way, it was also liberating. It forced me to take control of my own life, to make decisions for myself rather than following Richard's lead as I had for decades." "Like selling the house," she observed. "Yes. And more importantly, like rebuilding my identity around something other than being Richard Wilson's wife and Olivia and Nathan's mother. Finding my voice as an artist, as a teacher, as a woman in my own right." Something shifted in Olivia's expression, not quite understanding, but perhaps the beginning of it. "I still wish you'd told us about the financial problems, about feeling invisible. We might have helped." "Perhaps," I conceded. "Or perhaps you would have tried to solve problems I needed to solve for myself. Either way, we can't change the past. We can only decide what kind of relationship we want moving forward." "And what kind do you want, Mom?" Olivia asked, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. I considered the question seriously. "I want a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine interest. I want to know about your life, Olivia. Not just the achievements and milestones, but the struggles and doubts too. And I want you to know about mine, to see me as a complete person, with my own passions and purposes. I want us to build something authentic, even if it's occasionally uncomfortable. I'm not sure I know how to do that, she admitted. We've never had that kind of relationship. I know, I said gently. We've both played our roles for so long they've hardened into habits. But we can learn if we're willing. Thomas, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Eleanor, I think we all owe you an apology. We've been so caught up in our own narratives about this family that we failed to see what was actually happening. That's on us. I nodded, appreciating his candor. Thank you, Thomas. The exhibition tomorrow, Olivia said suddenly. I'd like to come, if the invitation is still open. Of course, I replied, surprised but pleased. It starts at noon. Good. She nodded decisively. I want to see this other side of you, the artist, the teacher, the community leader. It seems I've been missing quite a lot. For the first time that day, I felt a genuine connection forming between us. Tentative, fragile, but real. The house would still be sold. My estate would still be distributed according to my wishes. But perhaps something new was beginning amid the endings. There's one more thing I'd like to discuss, I said, seizing the moment of openness. Something I think Richard would want you both to know, now that you're ready to hear it. Nathan and Olivia exchanged glances. What is it? Nathan asked. I took a deep breath. Your father wasn't just financially reckless toward the end. He was unfaithful, multiple times throughout our marriage. The shock on their faces was painful to witness, but this truth needed to be spoken if we were ever to move beyond the idealized version of our family history. No, Olivia whispered. Dad wouldn't. He did, I said firmly. I discovered evidence after his death, emails, hotel receipts, even a separate phone. I had suspected at times during our marriage, but I chose to look away, to preserve our family, to maintain the story we were all living within. But that story wasn't true, and continuing to pretend it was is doing none of us any good. Nathan looked devastated. Why tell us this now? Why not let us remember him as we knew him? Because the man you knew was only part of who Richard truly was, I explained. He was complex, charming, ambitious, loving in his way, but also deeply selfish and deceptive. Understanding that complexity might help you understand some of the patterns in your own lives. I looked directly at Olivia. Like your tendency to prioritize image over authenticity, or your difficult marriage to Thomas, which mirrors mine with Richard in ways that concern me greatly. Olivia flinched. Thomas looked away, his discomfort obvious. And Nathan, I continued, your pattern of avoiding conflict, of going along, to get along, that came from watching me do the same for decades. Neither approach leads to genuine happiness. I learned that too late, but you don't have to. The room was silent except for the distant sounds of Sophie and Tyler in the kitchen. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice tight with emotion. You've been carrying all of this alone, all these years. Yes, I said simply. That ends today, she declared with unexpected fierceness. Whatever happens with the house, whatever you decide about your will, we're not leaving you to carry these burdens alone anymore. Nathan nodded in agreement. We've been terrible children, haven't we? Not terrible, I corrected. Just human. Caught in patterns that none of us recognized until now. Rebecca, practical as always, asked, what can we do, specifically to support you now? I considered this. Respect my decisions, even when you don't agree with them. Make time for regular connection, not just holiday visits or occasional calls, but genuine engagement with each other's lives. And perhaps most importantly, be honest with each other and yourselves. No more facades, no more pretending everything is fine when it isn't. That sounds challenging, Olivia admitted. But necessary. It won't be easy, I acknowledged. We have decades of habitual behavior to overcome. But I believe it's possible. Thomas checked his watch. It's getting late. If we're all attending the exhibition tomorrow, perhaps we should continue this conversation then. Give everyone time. To process? I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional intensity of the day. That's a good idea. Why don't we meet at the community center at noon? You can see my work, meet my friends, and perhaps understand a bit more about the life I've been building. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, each interaction felt different, more thoughtful, less automatic. Nathan hugged me tightly, whispering another apology in my ear. Rebecca kissed my cheek and promised to bring the children early to help set up the exhibition. Even Olivia, usually so restrained, embraced me with uncharacteristic emotion. "We'll figure this out, Mom," she said. "I don't understand everything you're doing, but I want to try." "That's all I ask," I told her. After they left, I moved slowly. Through the quiet house, straightening furniture, putting away the barely touched lunch. The confrontation had been exhausting but necessary, like lancing a wound to allow healing to begin. I had no illusions that one difficult conversation would transform our family dynamics completely, but it felt like a beginning. As the day faded into evening, I found myself in my studio on the 3rd floor, the space where I had rediscovered my artistic voice after Richard's death. Canvases lined the walls, landscapes of the lake in different moods and seasons, abstract explorations of grief and renewal, portraits of fellow artists from the community center. This room, more than any other in the house, truly reflected who I had become. I settled at my easel and began to work on a painting I had started earlier that week. A view of the lake from an unusual perspective, looking not out from the shore but back toward the land. In the foreground was the Victorian silhouette of my house, and in the window of the 3rd floor studio, a tiny figure at an easel. Me, watching myself paint, the observer and the observed. As I added layers of color, blending light and shadow, I realized this painting captured exactly what had happened today. For the first time, my children had truly seen me. Not just the mother they thought they knew, but the complete person I had become. And in their reactions, I had seen them more clearly too. Not just as the children who had disappointed me, but as complex adults navigating their own struggles and blind spots. "Renewal," I murmured, the theme of tomorrow's exhibition suddenly resonant in new ways. Perhaps that's what this day had begun. Not just for me, but for all of us. A chance to let go of worn-out patterns and expectations. A chance to see each other anew. The painting would never hang in this house. Soon, it would belong to strangers who would create their own memories within these walls. But it would have a place of honor in my new home, a reminder that even at 75, transformation was not only possible, but essential. As darkness fell over the lake, I cleaned my brushes and prepared for bed, feeling lighter despite the emotional toll of the day. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the exhibition, more difficult conversations with my children, the continued process of dismantling one life to build another. But for the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not just my future in a new home, with new priorities and newfound autonomy, but our future as a family, one built on truth rather than comfortable illusions, on mutual respect rather than obligation. It wouldn't be perfect. Real relationships never are. But it would be authentic, and after a lifetime of pretense, authenticity felt like the greatest gift I could give myself, and them. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking not of Richard or the past, but of the exhibition tomorrow. Of Martin and Doris and the other artists whose lives had become intertwined with mine. Of the community I had built for myself when I most needed connection. And of my children and grandchildren, who would finally see this vital part of who I had become. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, gratitude filling me for this unexpected path my life had taken. For the courage to make difficult choices. For the opportunity, even at 75, to become more fully myself than I had ever been before. The morning of the exhibition arrived with perfect late spring weather. Sunshine poured through my bedroom windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden light. I had slept better than expected after the emotional turbulence of the previous day. Perhaps truth, once spoken, creates its own kind of peace. I dressed with care, selecting a cornflower blue linen dress that complemented my silver hair and brought out the color of my eyes. Around my neck, I fastened a pendant I had made myself, a small piece of lake glass wrapped in silver wire, something I had created in the metalworking class I'd taken last winter. Not valuable in any conventional sense, but precious to me as a symbol of transformation, of something rough made beautiful through time and attention. As I made my way downstairs, I realized I was looking at my home differently today. Not with the desperate attachment I'd felt for years, nor with the resentment that had recently colored my perception. Instead, I saw it clearly. A beautiful house that had served its purpose in my life, that held memories both painful and precious, but that no longer fit who I had become. "Goodbye," I whispered to the empty rooms as I gathered my art supplies and the refreshments I'd promised to bring. It wasn't my final farewell, that would come later after the closing and the move, but it felt important to acknowledge that our relationship had fundamentally changed. The drive to the Lakeside Community Center took only minutes. The modest brick building near the town square had been built in the 1950s and showed its age, but recent renovations had brightened the interior and improved accessibility. It wasn't grand like the Victorian cultural centers in larger cities, but it had become a second home to me and many others in our little artistic community. Martin was already there, methodically hanging paintings with precise measurements between each piece. Doris was arranging name cards and price lists on a table near the entrance. Other artists bustled about, setting up refreshments, adjusting lighting, placing flowers in strategic locations. "Eleanor," Doris called when she spotted me. "Perfect timing. We need your eye on the west wall. Martin and Jeffrey are having a creative disagreement about the arrangement." I laughed, setting down my contributions to the refreshment table. Heading to the west wall, I found Martin and Jeffrey, a retired architect with a passion for abstract expressionism, engaged in a heated debate about the sequencing of several large canvases. "Gentlemen," I interjected with mock severity, "what seems to be the problem?" Martin gestured expressively. "Jeffrey insists on hanging these chronologically, while I maintain that the visual harmony of colors and shapes should determine placement. And we all know Eleanor will side with me," Jeffrey said with a wink, given her impeccable sense of design. It was exactly the light-hearted interaction I needed after yesterday's intensity. These people knew me, not as Richard's widow or Olivia and Nathan's mother, but as Eleanor the artist, Eleanor the organizer, Eleanor the voice of reason in artistic disputes. With them, I never had to shrink myself or manage others' emotions. I could simply be. "Let's try something different," I suggested, studying the paintings. "What if we arrange them to tell a story? Not chronologically, but emotionally, beginning with restraint, moving through conflict, and ending with resolution?" Both men considered this, then nodded slowly. "That could work," Martin acknowledged. "I'm willing to try it," Jeffrey agreed. "Though I still think, save it for the post-exhibition wine," I cut in with a smile. "We have 2 hours until opening, and I still need to set up my own pieces." The morning passed in a flurry of activity, adjusting lighting, printing last-minute labels, arranging cheese plates and wine glasses. By 11:45, everything was ready. The gallery transformed from a multi-purpose community room to a professional-looking exhibition space. My own paintings, a series of lake views showing the same vista through different seasons and emotional states, occupied a prominent corner. "Nervous?" Doris asked, appearing at my elbow with 2 cups of coffee. "A little," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Not about the exhibition, about my family coming to see it." She nodded, understanding. "The big confrontation happened. Yesterday?" "Yes, it was difficult. Necessary, but difficult." "And they're actually showing up today? All of them?" "They said they would," I replied. "Whether they follow through remains to be seen." Doris squeezed my arm. "Well, if they don't, it's their loss. And if they do but behave badly, remember, I'm small but scrappy. I can take 'em." I laughed, grateful for her fierce loyalty. "I'll keep that in mind." At noon exactly, the doors opened to the public. Local residents began to filter in. Some regular supporters of our exhibitions, others curious newcomers. The mayor arrived with his wife, making a point to speak with each artist. The high school art teacher brought several promising students who gazed at the work with serious concentration. And then, to my surprise and cautious joy, my family arrived, all of them together. Nathan and Rebecca with Sophie and Tyler, Olivia and Thomas slightly behind them, everyone dressed appropriately for an art opening. They paused in the entrance, taking in the transformed space, searching for me among the gathering crowd. Sophie spotted me first. "Grandma!" she called, waving enthusiastically. "This is so cool!" I made my way through the attendees to greet them, conscious of the many eyes tracking this reunion. Yesterday's confrontation had taken place in private, but this public acknowledgement of my artistic life, felt equally significant. "You came," I said, unable to keep the pleasure from my voice. "All of you." "We said we would," Nathan replied, embracing me warmly. "We wanted to see your work, to better understand this part of your life." Rebecca hugged me next. "The exhibition looks amazing, Eleanor. So professional." Even Olivia seemed genuinely impressed, her critical eye taking in the thoughtful arrangement of artwork. "This is quite something, Mom. I had no idea the community center could look like this." "A lot of work went into it," I acknowledged. "Would you like a tour? I can introduce you to some of the artists." For the next hour, I guided my family through the exhibition, explaining the theme of renewal and how each artist had interpreted it. I introduced them to Martin and Doris, to Jeffrey and the other regular members of our artistic community. To my delight, they engaged sincerely, asking questions, commenting on techniques, showing genuine interest. When we reached my corner of the gallery, I fell silent, allowing them to take in my work without commentary. The series of paintings represented 3 years of artistic development, from technically proficient but emotionally restrained early works to the more expressive, confident pieces I had completed recently. Sophie was the first to speak. "Grandma, these are beautiful. I love how you captured the same view but made it feel so different each time." "That's exactly what I was trying to do," I told her, pleased by her perceptiveness. "The lake is constant, but our perception of it changes with seasons, with light, with our own emotional state." Olivia was studying one painting intently. Winter scene with the lake partially frozen, the sky heavy with imminent snow. Unlike the others in the series, this piece featured a solitary figure on the shore, back to the viewer, facing the vast gray expanse. "This one," she said quietly. "When did you paint this?" "About a year after your father died," I replied, "during that first difficult winter alone." She nodded, something like recognition in her eyes. "It's how you felt, isn't it? Alone, facing something vast and cold and unknowable?" "Yes," I confirmed, surprised by her insight. "That's exactly how I felt." "You never said." "You never asked," I reminded her gently. "And at the time, I wasn't ready to tell you. or anyone else, how lost I truly felt. Olivia continued to gaze at the painting. But you're not there anymore, are you? That's why the later paintings feel so different. Brighter, more vibrant, more free. No, I'm not there anymore, I agreed. That's why selling the house feels right, why changing my will feels necessary. I've moved beyond that place of isolation and grief. I've found a new way of being in the world. Nathan joined us, studying the winter scene with the same intensity his sister had shown. I wish we'd been there for you more, he said softly, instead of expecting you to always be there for us. I wish that too, I admitted. But we can't change the past. We can only decide how we want to move forward. A small commotion at the entrance drew our attention. Cheryl Baker, the arts reporter from the regional newspaper, had arrived with her photographer. Martin hurried over to greet them, then began leading them through the exhibition, stopping at selected works for photos and comments. Is that press coverage? Olivia asked, her professional interest piqued. Yes, from the Lakeshore Chronicle. They do a monthly arts feature. We're hoping for a nice spread on this exhibition. It's our most ambitious one yet. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Impressive, Eleanor. You've created quite a cultural event here. Not just me, I corrected. It's been a community effort. Martin was now leading Cheryl in our direction. As they approached, I heard him saying, "And here's the heart of our exhibition, Eleanor Wilson's Seasons of Light series." Eleanor is not only one of our most accomplished artists, but also the driving force behind this entire event. I felt myself blushing at his praise. Cheryl smiled warmly as she extended her hand. "Mrs. Wilson, I've heard so much about your work. Would you mind answering a few questions for our feature?" Before I could respond, Olivia stepped forward. "Excuse me, but are you Cheryl Baker? I'm Olivia Parker. I used to write for the Chicago Tribune. Your arts coverage is exceptionally good for a regional publication." Cheryl beamed at the compliment. "Thank you. We try to give local arts the attention they deserve. Are you a friend of Eleanor's?" "I'm her daughter," Olivia replied, with unmistakable pride in her voice. "And I'd just like to say that her talent has been the family's best-kept secret for far too long. We're all thrilled to see her work finally getting the recognition it deserves." I stared at my daughter in astonishment, not just because of her generous words, though they were surprising enough, but because of what they represented. Olivia, who had been so angry about my decisions just yesterday, was now publicly claiming connection to me, publicly supporting my artistic endeavors. It was a gesture I hadn't expected and couldn't have asked for. The interview proceeded with Cheryl asking thoughtful questions about my artistic process, the theme of renewal, and my role in organizing the exhibition. To my continued amazement, both Olivia and Nathan contributed comments about how my art reflected qualities they'd always seen in me: my attention to detail, my sensitivity to light and color, my ability to find beauty in ordinary moments. Were they being sincere, or merely putting on a good show for the reporter? I couldn't be entirely sure, but their words seemed genuine, their pride unfeigned. Perhaps they were finally seeing me clearly, or perhaps they were beginning to understand what they had missed by reducing me to the role of mother alone. After the interview, as Cheryl moved on to speak with other artists, Olivia pulled me aside. "Mom, I want you to know, I meant what I said. I am proud of you. I just wish I'd paid attention sooner." "Thank you," I said, emotion making it difficult to say more. "That means a great deal to me." She hesitated, then continued. "Thomas and I have been talking about everything you said yesterday, about Dad, about our marriage." She glanced across the room where Thomas was deep in conversation with Jeffrey about architectural influences in abstract art. "You were right. There are similarities I haven't wanted to face." It was a significant admission from my proud, perfectionist daughter. "Recognizing patterns is the first step to changing them," I offered. "That's what I'm hoping," she replied. "We've decided to try counseling. Thomas wasn't thrilled with the idea, but after what you shared about Dad," she shook her head. "I don't want to end up like you and Dad, presenting a perfect facade while everything crumbles underneath." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "It takes courage to look honestly at your life and relationships, to admit when changes are needed." "I'm learning that from you," Olivia said with a small smile. 75 years old and still teaching your daughter life lessons. "That's what mothers do," I told her, "even when they're selling the family home and changing their wills." We shared a quiet laugh, the tension between us easing further. It wasn't complete resolution. We had years of patterns to unravel, expectations to recalibrate, new boundaries to establish. But it was a beginning, more promising than I had dared to hope for. As the afternoon progressed, I watched my family interact with my artistic community, worlds colliding in ways I found both strange and wonderful. Rebecca and Doris discovered a shared interest in fiber arts and exchanged contact information. Nathan engaged Martin in a serious discussion about the economic challenges facing aging artists. Sophie followed Jeffrey around, peppering him with questions about abstract expressionism, while Tyler helped the youngest member of our art group, a 16-year-old prodigy named Zoe, arrange her pottery display. Even Thomas seemed genuinely engaged, his corporate lawyer persona softening as he discovered common ground with several artists who had left professional careers to pursue creative passions in retirement. Only Olivia remained somewhat reserved, though her earlier gesture of support had been significant. As the exhibition began to wind down, Martin called for everyone's attention. "Before you all depart, I want to thank everyone who made this exhibition possible, particularly our fearless leader, Eleanor Wilson, whose vision and persistence brought renewal from concept to reality." Applause filled the room, and I felt my cheeks warm with embarrassment and pleasure. "What many of you may not know," Martin continued, "is that Eleanor has recently made a significant decision. She's selling her historic home on Lakeshore Drive and donating half the proceeds to establish a permanent endowment for our community arts program." Murmurs of surprise and appreciation rippled through the crowd. I hadn't intended for this information to be shared so publicly, but Martin's eyes twinkled with mischief as he continued. "This extraordinarily generous gift will ensure that our classes, exhibitions, and outreach programs continue for generations to come. In recognition of this contribution, the board has voted unanimously to rename our gallery space the Eleanor Wilson Gallery for Creative Aging." More applause, louder, this time. Someone called for a speech. I hesitated, then stepped forward, gathering my thoughts. "Thank you all," I began, looking around at the faces that had become so dear to me, my fellow artists, my new friends, and now, perhaps, my reconciling family. When I first walked into this building 5 years ago, I was lost. My husband had died, my children were distant, and I had no clear sense of who I was beyond the roles I had played for others. I paused, emotion threatening to overcome me. What I found here was more than an opportunity to make art. I found a community that saw me clearly, that valued what I could contribute, that encouraged me to discover new aspects of myself at an age when many people believe growth and transformation are no longer possible. My gaze found Olivia and Nathan, standing together near the back of the room. I've learned that renewal isn't just for the young, that authenticity matters at every age, that it's never too late to reimagine your life and create something beautiful from whatever materials you have at hand. I gestured to the artwork surrounding us. That's what we've all done here, created beauty from our experiences, our challenges, our unique perspectives. And that's what this gallery space represents, a place where transformation continues throughout life, where aging is seen not as decline, but as an opportunity for deeper, more meaningful expression. The room had grown very quiet, everyone listening intently. The decision to sell my home wasn't easy, It represented decades of memories, of family life, of identity. But I've realized that home isn't necessarily a physical structure. It's where you feel seen and valued for who you truly are. For me, that's here, in this community, with all of you. I took a deep breath, finding the courage to speak a final truth. And perhaps with new understanding and effort, it can also be in my relationships with my children and grandchildren. Relationships based not on obligation or habit, but on genuine connection and mutual respect. As I finished speaking, applause was thunderous in the small gallery. Martin raised a glass in toast, and others followed suit. But what moved me most was the sight of my family, Olivia and Nathan, Thomas and Rebecca, Sophie and Tyler, all applauding with genuine emotion on their faces. The formal reception ended, but many lingered, reluctant to conclude such a meaningful occasion. I found myself surrounded by well-wishers, congratulations, and questions about my future plans. Through it all, I kept glancing at my children, gauging their reactions, wondering if the day's goodwill would persist beyond this public setting. As the last guests departed and we began the process of cleaning up, Nathan approached me, his expression thoughtful. "Mom, that was quite a speech. Quite a gift, too." "It felt right," I told him. "This place gave me back to myself when I most needed it. I want to ensure it can do the same for others." He nodded slowly. "I get that now. I didn't yesterday, but seeing you here with these people, with your art, I understand why this matters so much to you." "Thank you," I said simply. Rebecca joined us, slipping her arm through Nathan's. "The children are wondering if we're staying for dinner. Apparently, Sophie has made a new friend in that young pottery artist and wants to hear all about her techniques." "We hadn't planned to stay," Nathan said, looking at me questioningly. "But if you're not too tired, Mom?" The request warmed me. How long had it been since my children had voluntarily extended time with me? "I'd like that very much," I replied. "There's a lovely little Italian restaurant just down the street. Nothing fancy, but the food is excellent." "Perfect," Rebecca said. "I'll round up the kids." Olivia and Thomas were talking about heading back to Chicago, but maybe they'll join us if we ask. To my surprise, they did. Our party of 8 was seated at a long table in the back garden of Salvatore's, string lights twinkling overhead in the early evening. It felt surreal. All of us together, sharing a meal without the tension that had defined our gatherings for so long. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, centered not on superficial updates, but on genuine exchange. "So, when do you close on the condo, Grandma?" Sophie asked, twirling pasta on her fork with teenage enthusiasm. 3 weeks from Tuesday," I replied. "And the house listing goes live online tomorrow. My realtor expects it will sell quickly, given the location and the current market." "Where will you put all your stuff?" Tyler wondered practically. I smiled at his directness. "Most of it won't come with me. The condo is about a quarter the size of the house, so I'm keeping only what truly matters to me. My art supplies, some favorite furniture pieces, books, and meaningful keepsakes." "What about the rest?" Olivia asked, and I noticed her tone was curious rather than accusatory, a subtle but significant shift. "That's something I wanted to discuss with all of you," I said, seizing the opening. "I've made an inventory of everything in the house. There are certain items I'd like each of you to have, things that hold special meaning or family history. Beyond that, you're welcome to select additional pieces that matter to you before the estate sale." Nathan looked relieved. I was worried about family photos, Dad's collection of first editions. "All cataloged," I assured him. "I've made digital copies of all the photographs, and I've designated specific books for each of you based on your interests and connection to them." "You've thought of everything," Thomas observed, sounding genuinely impressed. "I've had 5 years to plan," I reminded him, "even if I only recently found the courage to execute those plans." "About that," Olivia began, setting down her wine. Glass deliberately. I want to apologize for my reaction yesterday. The things I said about you being impulsive or emotional, that wasn't fair. I studied my daughter's face, noting the effort this admission cost her. Thank you, Olivia. That means a lot to me. I still don't fully understand all your decisions, she continued carefully. But after today, seeing you with your friends, with your art, I realize there's been a whole side of your life I've completely missed. That's on me, not you. It's on all of us, Nathan added. We've been so wrapped up in our own lives that we failed to see how much yours was changing. The acknowledgement felt like a gift, not because it absolved them of past neglect, but because it recognized the reality of our situation without defensiveness or blame. We've all been caught in patterns that weren't serving us well, I said. The important thing is that we're beginning to see them clearly. Sophie, ever the perceptive one, asked the question that hung unspoken in the air. So what happens now? With all of us, I mean. The adults exchanged glances, no one quite sure how to answer. Finally, I spoke from the heart. Now we try to build something new, something more honest, more balanced. It won't happen overnight, and there will be missteps along the way. But I believe we can create relationships that honor who we all are now, not who we were or who we expected each other to be. I'd like that, Nathan said quietly. Rebecca and I have been talking. We want to commit to regular visits, not just holidays or special occasions, but real time together. Maybe one weekend a month, like we mentioned earlier. And we'd like you to come to Chicago more often, Olivia added. Not to babysit or help with anything, just to spend time together. My company has a box at the Art Institute. We could go to exhibitions, maybe take some classes together. The generosity of these offers, so different from the anger of yesterday, moved me deeply. I would love that, I said, my voice husky with emotion. Both those things. And what about the grandkids? Tyler asked, practical as always. Where? Will we stay when we visit you? My new condo has a guest room, I told him. It's not large, but it's comfortable for short stays. And there's a wonderful hotel just down the street for longer visits. Plus, the lakefront has a public beach with paddleboard rentals, much more exciting than my quiet shoreline. Cool, he nodded, clearly already envisioning future adventures. Sophie had been unusually quiet, her expression thoughtful. Grandma, she said suddenly, would you teach me to paint? When we visit, I mean. I've always wanted to learn, but my school's art program got cut last year. Her request touched me, in a way I hadn't expected. Of all the connections I had hoped to build or rebuild with my family, sharing my art with my granddaughter hadn't occurred to me. I would be honored, I told her sincerely. We could set up easels on my new balcony. The view of the lake is spectacular, perfect for beginners. She beamed, clearly pleased with this plan. Maybe I could even exhibit something in your gallery someday. The Eleanor Wilson Gallery for Creative Aging, Thomas mused, sipping his wine. That's quite a legacy, Eleanor. More meaningful than just passing down a house. That's what I've come to believe, I agreed. That legacy isn't just about physical assets or financial inheritance. It's about values, passions, ways of seeing the world. It's about the impact we have on others while we're here. Olivia, who had been listening intently, added, and it's about honesty, about acknowledging the whole truth of a life, not just the convenient or comfortable parts. She hesitated, then continued. I've been thinking about what you said about Dad, about his infidelities, his financial deceptions. It's been hard to reconcile with the father I thought I knew. I imagine it has, I said gently. I struggled with it for years myself. But I think I understand now why you needed to tell us, she continued. Not to tarnish our memories, but to help us see the patterns more clearly, to break cycles that might otherwise continue. Her insight surprised and moved me. Yes, exactly that. I don't want to be like him, she said quietly, placing image above substance, appearance above truth. I don't want my marriage to follow that pattern. Thomas reached for her hand, his expression somber. We're working on it. Starting with therapy next week, like we mentioned. I nodded, acknowledging their effort without intruding further on something so personal. I'm proud of both of you for taking that step. As our dinner concluded and we prepared to part ways, I found myself filled with a cautious hope. The future I had envisioned for myself. The condo overlooking the lake, the continued work with the community arts center, the freedom to explore my creativity without constraint, was taking shape as planned. But now it appeared that this future might include my family in ways I hadn't dared to imagine, not as obligations or burdens, but as genuine companions on the journey. Outside the restaurant, as we said our goodbyes, Olivia surprised me with a tight embrace. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you clearly. I love you too, I replied, holding her close. And I'm learning to see you more clearly as well. Nathan hugged me next, his tall frame enfolding me protectively. We'll be back in 3 weeks to help with the move, he promised. No arguments. I wouldn't dream of it, I assured him. As they drove away, I stood on the sidewalk watching until their taillights disappeared around the corner. The evening had grown cool, a gentle breeze rippling off the lake a few blocks away. I decided to walk home along the shore, taking the scenic route back to the house that would soon belong to someone else. The path along the lakeshore was peaceful at this hour, only a few joggers and dog walkers sharing the space. The water stretched dark and vast beneath a sky transitioning from twilight to true night, stars beginning to emerge overhead. I found a bench facing the water and sat for a moment, absorbing the tranquility of the scene and the events of the remarkable day. A sense of completion settled over me. Not an ending, but the satisfying close of one chapter and the promising beginning of another. The house on the lake had served its purpose in my life. It had sheltered my family through decades of growth and change. It had witnessed joy and sorrow, success and failure, truth and deception. But like me, it was ready for a new chapter, new occupants, new stories to hold. As for my children, the patterns established over decades wouldn't change overnight. There would be disappointments ahead, moments of regression into old habits, perhaps even conflicts as we all adjusted to new boundaries and expectations. But something fundamental had shifted. They had seen me, truly seen me, perhaps for the first time. And in that seeing, they had glimpsed themselves more clearly as well. My decision to change my will remained the right one. The community arts center deserved the support my gift would provide. My estate would still be distributed according to my carefully considered plan, honoring those who had truly been present in my life. But the spirit behind those decisions had evolved from justified resentment to serene clarity about what truly mattered to me and where I wished my legacy to endure. Standing to continue my walk home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because all problems were solved or all wounds healed, but because at 75, I had finally claimed my right to prioritize my own needs, to speak difficult truths, and to reimagine my life based not on others' expectations but on my deepest values. The path ahead curved gently along the shoreline, lit intermittently by vintage-style lampposts. Each pool of light illuminated a small segment of the journey, just enough to see the next few steps clearly. Beyond that lay shadows, not threatening, but simply unknown, waiting to be discovered. It seemed an apt metaphor for this stage of life. I didn't need to see the entire path. I simply needed the courage to keep moving forward, one illuminated section at a time. When I finally reached the Victorian house on the lake, I paused on the porch, looking back at the water glimmering in the moonlight. This view had been my constant companion through decades of change. Soon it would belong to someone else, while I would have a different perspective. Higher, more panoramic, less intimate, but with its own beauty. "Thank you," I whispered to the house, to the lake, to whatever force had given me the courage to finally choose myself after a lifetime of choosing others. Then I stepped inside, ready to begin the practical work of transition, sorting, packing, preparing for the move not just to a new home, but into a new way of being in the world. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my lakefront condo, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. Behind me, the space was arranged exactly as I had envisioned, my favorite reading chair positioned to catch. The morning light, my easel by the window overlooking the harbor, walls adorned with selected paintings that represented significant moments in my artistic journey. The downsizing had been liberating. Each item kept earned its place not through monetary value or obligation, but through genuine connection to who I was now. The house had sold quickly, above asking price, to a young family with 3 children who fell in love with its history and character. Knowing that new memories would be created within those walls brought me unexpected peace. My phone chimed with an incoming text, Sophie sending a photo of her first completed canvas. A somewhat wobbly but heartfelt rendering of the lake view from my balcony, captured during their visit last weekend. "What do you think, Grandma? Ready? For the Eleanor Wilson Gallery?" Her message read, the teasing affection evident even in text form. I smiled, typing back words of genuine encouragement. The monthly visits Nathan had promised had indeed materialized, not from obligation, but from a growing appreciation for our evolving relationship. Olivia called weekly now, our conversations gradually deepening beyond surface updates to meaningful exchange. Next month, we were scheduled to attend a weekend workshop at the Art Institute together. Her suggestion, not mine. The Community Arts Center was thriving with the security of the endowment established from the house sale. Martin and Doris had embarked on an ambitious expansion of programming for seniors throughout the county, with me serving as artistic director for the initiative. My days were full, purposeful, shaped by choices that reflected my values and passions rather than others' expectations. As darkness fell over the lake, lights began to twinkle along the opposite shore, evidence of other lives, other stories unfolding parallel to my own. At 75, I had finally learned that it wasn't too late to rewrite my story, to claim my right to authenticity, to prioritize joy and meaning in whatever time remained to me. The forgotten birthday that had initially sparked my decision now seemed almost insignificant, not because it hadn't hurt, but because it had ultimately led to something so much more important than a celebration or a cake. It had forced me to recognize how invisible I had become, not just to my children, but in some ways to myself. And that recognition had become the catalyst for transformation. The inheritance my children would ultimately receive was smaller in financial terms than they had once expected. But the legacy I hoped to leave them was far richer. The example of a woman who had found the courage to reinvent herself at an age when many believe change is no longer possible. A woman who had learned, finally, that the most valuable gift we can give ourselves and others is the truth of who we truly are. "Thank you," I whispered again to the universe, to the lake, to whatever force had given me the courage to make these changes. Then I turned from the balcony and went inside, closing the door on one perfect day and opening my heart to whatever tomorrow might bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.